Recording, and then I'm going to share my screen because I am giving our introduction today. So, hi everyone, welcome to our officially the last session of our professional development series for the summer. My name is Bernie Traversari, and I'm the Director of Operations and Programs for the Society for Conservation Biology in North America. For those of you that may not be familiar with SCBNA, we're a professional scientific society that is dedicated to advancing the science and practice of conserving Earth's biological diversity. We are affiliated with the Global Society for Conservation Biology, but we are focused on the North American region, which for us means the US and Canada. Um, we essentially support conservation practitioners and academics from a variety of different fields, and we do that through a variety of different ways. We have these professional development opportunities that you've probably participated in over the summer. We also host research and publications, largely as a part of our global society. And then we also have our biannual conference, which takes place every 2 years, the next iteration of which will be hosted with the Society for Ecological Restoration in Milwaukee, Wisconsin in 2026. So be on the lookout for that. Now, if you are a member of SCBNA, that's fantastic. If you're not a member, I strongly encourage you to join, if only to be better apprised of all the things that are going on within our society. I've included here a QR code that folks can take a picture of, and you will be redirected to our membership page. I will note that we now have a free associate membership for folks who want to join and for whom paying for a membership might be an obstacle. So I encourage everyone to do so and to join our society. Okay, so now I want to talk a little bit about our Student Affairs Committee, which is a committee that has put up all of these really cool events over the summer. In a nutshell, the Student Affairs Committee exists to organize activities and events that benefit undergraduates, graduate students, and early career professionals. And we do this through, again, a variety of different means. We have skill building workshops that take place online. We have career development opportunities via panels with experts and mentoring events. And we also organize social and networking events, either virtually or during our conference. So really, the Student Affairs Committee is all about empowering the next generation of conservation practitioners, both within our society, but also anyone who is engaged in this work. All of this, however, is not done by any one individual. The committee is made up of amazing people who come together to create all these different events. Then their names are included here, and I will mention that the chair of the committee is our newly appointed student representative, Jumana Khan, who is also coincidentally the person leading today's webinar. So I'll talk a little bit about Jumana in just a second. The Student Affairs Committee is always looking for additional folks to join in and to help develop the next series of professional development opportunities that we'll design over the next few years. So if you're interested in being part of the committee, send an email to the address below, or you can contact Jumana or me directly for additional information. I will also mention that the Student Affairs Committee has been working on a new project that is meant to support career development for both members and non-members of SCBNA. Specifically, we've been trying to compile a list of non-US federal opportunities for graduate and postdoctoral fellowships and assistantships, undergraduate research opportunities, student and professional internships, and small, medium, or large grant opportunities. So if you know of any of these, I will ask that you take a picture of the corresponding QR code here in the top left and add that opportunity to the list. And then if you're just looking for opportunities, then I encourage you to take a picture of the QR code at the bottom of this page, where you will find a list of current opportunities that have been compiled so far. And I will make a point to say that I'll add the actual links to all of the pages that I've mentioned so far in our chat once our workshop begins. Okay, last thing I'll mention before introducing Jumana in today's session is that this is like I said before, the last official session in our data analysis and skill building webinar series for the summer. However, we do have one more bonus session, is what we're calling it, that will take place on October 1st, and we'll focus on Mirati software for conservation project adaptive management. So I encourage everyone to join that one if you can. And then I've also included some additional offerings that I believe might be of interest to folks that are in today's session. Specifically, we have an equity, inclusion, and diversity webinar that will focus on international students and their status in the US, taking place in September 18th. And then we'll have a conservation education workshop focusing on community conservation for global biodiversity taking place on September 24th. And you can register for either of these activities and all of their other online offerings via our website. Okay, so on to today's session. It is my pleasure to sort of reintroduce Jumana to everyone. Like I said before, Jumana is our new student affairs representative in the SBNA board. And I wanted to give a quick brief introduction of Jumana's background, and then I'll let her dive into her presentation. So growing up along the shores of the Great Lakes, Jumana developed a deep appreciation for the connections between people, water, and land. After completing a master's in environmental studies, she worked with farmers and conservation partners to restore marginal farmland, prevent erosion, and support native biodiversity along Lake Erie's northern shore. Jumana is passionate about amplifying voices within the conservation community and believes that effective conservation is rooted in relationships among people and between people and the environment that sustains. I am so excited to have Jumana present today, and I will pass it on to her.
Thanks so much, Bernie. Okay. I'm going to share my screen. I will need a thumbs up from everybody to let me know that you can see it. Can you see my screen all right? Okay, perfect. Thumbs up. Okay, so thank you again, Bernie, and welcome everyone. I'm very excited to share my experiences with nature-based solutions in areas within the Lake Erie watershed. With this presentation, I hope to go over nature-based solutions and what that means, showcase some examples, and share key considerations that go into their establishment. And at the end, I'll ask you to think about project implementation yourself with an activity and have you all here leaving as nature-based solution practitioners. So throughout my presentation, I'll have questions for you, so please someone answer. And of course, you can ask me any questions at any point. You can pop them in the chat, or if you're feeling brave, you can raise your hand up and share your question that way. I want this to feel like a conversation. I don't want to just be rambling on the whole time, so please don't hesitate to share your curiosities. Oh, and yes, I made a note to remind myself to tell you that the pictures featured throughout this presentation that aren't taken from a satellite are all from the Lake Erie watershed in southwestern Ontario and showcase real examples of nature-based solutions. So Bernie did a really good job introducing me. I thought I'd go a little bit more into some of the details of my professional journey. So I began with a natural science background, completing my undergraduate and master's degree in biology and environmental studies at Western University here in Ontario. And after graduating, I was very quickly introduced to the worlds of conservation and restoration. And I spent over 4 years working with a nonprofit that restored plots of unproductive farmland and conservation authorities, which are quasi-governmental entities in Ontario that work at a watershed level. So it was during this time that I began working directly with nature-based solutions and learned about how ecology and relationship building and a sort of pan-governmental collaboration can be brought together and really result in tangible environmental change. It also made me more aware of the role of community and stewardship. So in 2023, I actually shifted gears a little bit towards social sciences and completed a master's at Dalhousie University, where I studied the decision-making processes behind spatial planning or the spatial distribution of activities in coastal areas. And I looked at how tools used in decision-making really capture and communicate local knowledge. Now I continue to speak with coastal community members in an effort to amplify their voices and their knowledge and strengthen our ecological understanding of specific environments. And through my consultancy, I still get to occasionally get my hands dirty and work to establish nature-based solutions. Oh, and if you're interested in connecting or taking a gander at the trajectory of my professional career so far, you can find me on LinkedIn. So, to geographically place our conversation today, I'm swooping you in to Lake Erie. Does anybody know where the name Lake Erie or Erie comes from? This is one of those questions I have for you, and I can't see. So somebody just shout it out if you know where the name Erie comes from. Hmm. Oh, there's chat. I can see the chat. No clue. Well, Erie actually comes from the Earlhonen people that lived on the south shores of Lake Erie. I've been so very lucky to spend most of my life connected to Lake Erie and its watershed, and it's actually where I'm joining you from today. I know people had mentioned where they were joining in from, but I'm curious to know if anybody knows if they're actually living, working, residing in the Lake Erie watershed. You pop it in the chat. I feel like I can see the chat better than I can see humans, so. Do we have anybody joining from Lake Erie watershed? If you don't know where the watershed is or how far it expands, it's about 60,000 square kilometers, or 23 square miles. And when I was telling my sister this, she was like, I don't know what that looks like or what that number means. So she's like, can you use something that we might be familiar with to get a better sense of the size? So I Googled and it's the size of 70,000 football fields. So I don't know if that helps anyone. But the area that it drains is areas of New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, and parts of Southern Ontario, which is where I'll be focusing the rest of my presentation. So to begin, I invite you to the north shores of Lake Erie, the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Lenape peoples who have lived and stewarded the lands and water for thousands of years and continue to do that today. I invite you to an area defined by historic and varying interactions between coasts, animals, and people, a place carved by glaciers into the Carolinian zone where southern hardwood forests of tulip trees, sassafras, black walnut can be found, where species of migratory birds and butterflies gather with the leaving and onset of winter, and where you can find good fishing for walleye and yellow perch. The towering bluffs of Lake Erie make way to fertile soils and flat terrain that have been farmed using the indigenous teachings of the Three Sisters, and more recently using intensive industrialized agriculture methods, which result in some of the highest yielding farmland in the country. The economic engine here is primarily agriculture, but also includes manufacturing and shipping, all of which have shaped the landscape as much as any river or ice age would. A century and a half ago, this region was home to vast wetlands, tall grass prairies, oak savanna, and extensive forest cover. But like so many landscapes around the world, the Lake Erie watershed, with its rich productivity, cultural history, and biodiversity, is now facing increasing pressure. With the changing landscape uses and these practices brought with the onset of European settlement and increasing human pressure, less than 5% of Southern Ontario's original wetlands remain, and prairie and savanna habitats have been converted almost entirely to agriculture. So wide-spanning habitat has been pieced up or fragmented and in some cases lost entirely. And it's this combination of the removal of vegetation and the establishment of impermeable surfaces in our cities, as well as the loosening up of topsoil with intensive agricultural practices that expose landscapes to wind and water erosion and flooding during rainfall and snowmelt events. With the washing away of topsoil and the introduction of excess nutrients from farm and urban runoff, the Lake Erie watershed in southern Ontario is experiencing algal blooms, or the excessive growth of algae in local and major waterways, which can affect, of course, water quality, but even air quality. And all of these interconnected challenges end up negatively impacting rural and recreational economies. But I mean, on the flip side of those somewhat depressing realities, there are really great opportunities to make positive change. And one of those opportunities lies in the establishment of nature-based solutions. So I want to get a really good sense of what nature-based solutions mean to you. So this is one of those questions I have again. So feel free to scan that QR code. It'll take you to another website. That website is also noted at the top. So you can type that into your, what do you call that? Wherever you put your websites and that, and you're on internet. Wow, I'm exposing myself to not being able to use a computer sometimes. Anyway, you can put in menti.com and type in that code, and it'll take you to another web page where I'll ask you to put in a word or a phrase that resonates with you when it comes to nature-based solutions. And I'm going to stop sharing for just a moment so I can open up the word cloud. And let me know if there are any troubles, if there are any troubles at all. Oh, perfect. People are participating. I'll give everybody about a minute or two. So we have restoration, modeled on nature. I see sustainability, two-eyed seeing. I saw in the chat, Riley had a hand up. I forget, was it something that I asked? Feel free to type in your question or anything, or maybe you had an answer to something, Riley, in the chat. We can get to that. Okay, one more minute on the word cloud and I'll continue. Okay, let's get back to the presentation here. Mhm. I'm just popping in the beautiful word cloud we just worked on. The perfectionist in me is taking time to crop this now. Okay, we'll leave it there. Share screen. Okay, wonderful. So thank you again for participating in that word cloud. And the good news is that you're all right. Nature-based solutions are just that. They're actions that are informed by their environmental conditions and make use of the natural processes of existing ecosystems to address societal challenges. Societal challenges like, let's say, reducing land erosion or flooding concerns or mitigating the impacts of climate change. It's important to know that we often use the phrase nature-based solutions as a contemporary or policy-driven term, but the principles of working to the strengths of natural processes to support human well-being, like, for example, maintaining or managing wetlands for water purification, or even conducting plant burns in grasslands to mimic natural fire regimes to renew soil, have all been practiced here by First Nation communities for tens of thousands of years. So what some may call solutions Others may understand as relationships. And these are relationships between people and land, where the functionality of and health of one is tied to the functionality and the health of the other. So nature-based solutions is a new term per se, but it's a very old concept, which, did you know, the technical term for a new phrase or word for an old concept is known as a retronym, which is a fun grammatical fact for everybody. Anyway, moving on to some of the most favored examples of nature-based solutions. A crowd favorite, I would say, is definitely wetland habitat. These are the most productive ecosystems that act as sponges to hold and slow water in landscapes that may be dealing with very fast and likely very erosive movements of water. So by slowing and holding water in wetlands, you can allow the sediments to settle, and the intercepted water can make its way into surrounding habitat again, or even recharge groundwater supplies. So you could think of wetlands as the kidneys of our environment, which is a very vital organ. Okay, let's say or wetlands are the kidneys of the environment. What would forests and or tree planting be? Hmm? Lungs. Perfect. Thank you very much, Maddie. Lungs is, I guess we could call this a human equivalent to the environmental world. And trees and shrubs really don't just provide shelter and food for humans and other animals. They capture and store carbon from the air and soil while providing oxygen. And their presence can also act as windbreaks or shelter belts that protect land from wind erosion. Grasslands or native grasses here, more specifically native tall grass prairies, have exceptionally extensive root systems that can grow up to 13 feet or 4 meters into the ground. People really like establishing grasslands to secure topsoil in sandy areas. They also provide important habitat for grassland nesting birds like the bobolink, which, if you don't know what they look like, you should look them up because they're adorable. And I've been told they resemble Billy Idol. Erosion control, I've included as a separate example, only because some of these projects use a mix of gray infrastructure like cobblestone or concrete in conjunction with wetlands, even other vegetation like trees and grasses as well, where heavier and faster stabilization of sites is required. But in general, you'll find that when establishing nature-based solutions, when the conditions are right, any combination or even all of these types or examples of nature-based solutions can be used together to address challenges and support biodiverse habitats. Oh, yes, I have a quick video here that showcases, let me see if it opens. Okay, tell me if you can see this YouTube screen. If you can't, then I'll have to stop and share, which I can do right now, actually. All right. Mhm. Right. Make sure that window is open. Okay. So this video is something that I had worked on with a colleague from the Lower Thames Valley Conservation Authority and a local production company, Huff Media Solutions. And the goal here was to highlight um, uh, examples of nature-based solutions in an agricultural context. So in the short video, we'll listen to the experiences of a farmer who had some projects implemented on his farmland in just on the bluffs of Lake Erie, you'll see.
The farm's on the north shore of Lake Erie, on the Lake Erie Bluffs. We farm a mix of cash crops, corn, soybeans, and wheat. The farm has a mixture of farmland, woodland, and gully. And my name's Joe Hens. I live on a farm. It's about 70 acres just outside of Wallestown, Ontario. Farm it's pretty sandy soil, especially along the lake bank, and it was very marginal production for cash crop. there was erosion concerns beforehand. Whenever there was a heavy rain, we did see some runoff. That was hard to manage, even with using no-till practices. And so we were looking for a solution to mitigate erosion on the lake bank, as well to find a suitable alternative to cropping the land. Alice brought in the expertise and the tools and the funding necessary for us to uh, make the project happen. We contributed in terms of preparing the ground for it. And then they came in with the planter and the seed and put the prairie grass into the ground. It took a year for it to get established, and we were very happy with the way it all came up. It seems to be a hardy plant. It's high sand. It handles the drought very well, and it keeps the wind erosion down, not only in the summer, but the straw that is left over from the prairie grass throughout the winter keeps the sand from blowing around all winter as well. We've seen quite an increase in wildlife, in pollinators, butterflies, bees, and everything used in the prairie grass. So it's been quite enjoyable for us as a family to use as well, and nice to see. I think it's benefited. We've seen a decrease in erosion since the prairie grass has been established, as well with the mixture of the wetlands that were put in. It provides a nice habitat for, I guess, local wildlife.
Okay, let's reshare. Sorry, there's a lot of bouncing back between my PowerPoint and other material, but I hope you're enjoying it so far. So this video, the landowner you would have heard chatted about his personal goals he had with nature-based solutions on his property. But in general, I wanted to talk about what the desired outcomes or goals for nature-based solutions are. Of course, these are unique to every project, and the details of goals should be defined very early on in the planning stages. But in general, the goals for nature-based solutions are to address a challenge or a set of challenges at hand in a way that benefits those involved, of course, but also the surrounding environment. For example, in general, okay, yes. For example, in the case of a property that's experiencing heavy seasonal flooding, benefits could be the provision of wildlife habitat while redirecting water to a more favorable place by introducing a wetland. And I think a shared goal for any nature-based solution practitioner really is to maintain project longevity and ensure a positive long-term impact. These projects, although very cost-effective, are no doubt expensive. They involve many people and are real hard-earned effort to heal connections, whether that be connections between, let's say, the water cycle and soil turnover, or the connections between people and the environment. And when you work very hard to make something beautiful and ideally restorative, you want to make sure that its impact is long-standing. So how would one attempt to make a long-term impact and meet defined goals? I've summarized a few key considerations to help move somebody establishing nature-based solutions towards success. But right off the bat, there is no one-size-fits-all approach to nature-based solutions. But honestly, these considerations are quite transferable to a lot of nature-based efforts. So, to define an area of interest and identify the best places to establish nature-based projects, you have to gather all necessary pertinent information. Natural and cultural heritage data will provide you with a baseline or historic understanding of what once was on the landscape, what may be the best project type suited for the area, and what the conservation or restoration or even cultural priorities from a natural or community perspective are. So, natural and cultural heritage data builds an overarching story that can help direct your planning and design and decision making, while topographical or soil data will help you determine the details of what you can establish on a site. For example, the topographical contours or the highs and lows of terrain of a site can help determine the shape of a wetland and the direction of water movement over land. And soil type will help you decide on what plant species can thrive. For example, tall grass prairie, as shown in the picture, does the best in sun-soaked sandy soils, which is a nice alliteration. whereas heavier clay is better suited for wetland projects because clay acts to hold water better than sand would. And I'm sure you can kind of mentally picture that as well. Pouring sand, let's say, into a clay rounded chip versus, or pouring water into clay versus water on sand. It works almost to seal the ground a little bit too, so it holds water better. And local input and stories also help you decide what you can establish on a site and provide a sort of vibe check, I say, for nature-based ideas. They can provide you with information not available on any website or database. They can let you know of historical or spiritual value of an area or of previous attempts for restoration. And you can also learn if the community would even welcome certain types of work in the area you might have deemed of interest in the first place. Also, conversations with community members can help you connect with a champion for nature-based work in an area. And this leads me to my second point, where building relationships with those whose community or whose lands you're working in is very important. In my opinion, moving forward with community approval takes precedence over regulators because it won't really matter if you have permits to do work if no one wants you to be there. But speaking of permits, please make sure you have them and have the right ones. Connecting with entities, I'm trying to be more inclusive of like American and Canadian regulatory policies, so I just call them entities. But those sort of bodies that manage stormwater drains or wet water bodies will let you know if the kinds of approval you need before starting any sort of earthwork or nature-based solution project. Having a good standing relationship with regulators can help you approach planning permit applications and project design much better than you would without their input and their feedback. And finally, finding the money. It seems to come down to funding a lot of the time, doesn't it? But it seems, especially in these contemporary times that we're living in, on both sides of Lake Erie, securing funding for environmental efforts can be challenging, and we may not be able to rely on government funding as we may have the same before. So diversifying your funding streams is necessary. And maybe that means speaking with grassroots or local environmental organization to pool resources. I'm just going to admit this person, sorry. Maybe to pool resources by partnering on a project, or maybe multiple partners can join on a proposal to strengthen funding applications. And another way to strengthen grant applications is by planning for projects to be multitaskers. In general, really, nature-based solutions aren't only addressing a societal challenge, but they're also an opportunity for learning. So you can have a project site that also acts, let's say, as a demonstration site for educational purposes, or maybe your project can also directly involve youth or other community members in restoration activities. So your nature-based solution can also become a community event. So things like that. And to ensure steps towards success, you also need to have a grasp on what the environment you're working in is projected to experience, especially in terms of climate change. So in southwestern Ontario, we're projected to experience, I think by the end of the century, rising temperatures, which means what? Milder winters and an expansion of the growing season, more days with extreme heat. We're also projected to experience more precipitation and more intense and frequent extreme rainfall events. So this image is from uh, um, an article that was focusing on a major flood event that happened last year in an area not too far from where I'm from. And it really kind of showcases the amount of water we're talking about when we think about a heavy rainfall event. So this is an image of the river that runs through the city that I'm from and how much it expands with a rainfall event. And this rain happened not even during the rainy season. So we're experiencing rain when we maybe aren't used to experiencing it. So that's something else that we have to be thinking about. And of course, extreme weather, so extreme increased risk of flood, especially during winter and spring. So thinking about what these projections mean for, let's say, the design of water intercepting projects or the kinds of plants that can tolerate these wetter, hotter, and maybe even more extreme conditions is really important and necessary when designing nature-based solutions. So this slide wraps up my presentation by restating a few key ideas and maybe leaving you with a few new thoughts. So firstly, can anyone remind me what a nature-based solution is? I'm looking to the chat. Or again, raise your hand up. We can have you share your answer that way too. What is a nature-based solution? I didn't put the answer on screen on purpose. 10 more seconds, which can feel like an eternity on Zoom in the quiet. Okay, nature-based solutions are an action that leverage natural processes to address societal challenges. It's vague, it's meant to be vague, but really the idea is to play to the strengths of nature for the purpose of benefiting human well-being or even economy, or addressing issues that we've identified as issues. Let's say erosion on your farmland. That's taking away areas that you would have planted corn in otherwise. So that's affecting your local economy. So thinking about it in those terms, we're really working with the environment to help people. So that is what a nature-based solution is in general. As I mentioned, it's a new term, but an old concept. And as we move into the future, we really need to consider climatic projections when it comes to planning and design. And something to also think about climate change is this sort of shifting of northward of like climatic latitude. So we're experiencing or seeing non-native, even naturalized species that are not, I guess, historically in this area that are now part of our environment. So maybe the way we think of species compositions in a grassland might be shifting. I really don't know the answer to this actually, but it's just thinking out loud here. And one of those other things to think of is the trends, the land use trends in the area of interest that you're thinking about putting a project in. Is your city or the area around the site that you're hoping to put a nature-based project in valued for its green space? Are you experiencing urban sprawl? Do you think in 5 years this plot of land that you're working on will exist as it is now? So thinking about that when you are planning, I know we talked about funding too. So how we're using our dollars is going to determine where we're putting these projects. And if we want to make sure we have that long-standing impact, we need to know that we're choosing sites with adequate information and really taking consideration of these thoughts here. So the final point I'm leaving everybody with is ensuring that the community is involved in every stage. I mean, a lot of times you're working on private land. I mean, that's mainly been my experience. So having their involvement from the beginning is necessary to do anything. But I've worked with some organizations that implement nature-based solutions on public land too, and knowing how they're going to use the space and respect the area and making them feel like they're part of it. I mean, they are part of it, but just reminding them that they are at every stage is necessary for acceptance and thrival of these systems. So that wraps up my presentation, and I thank you all for listening. We have a few minutes here. I'll say maybe 5 or 10 if we have questions. Feel free to pop them in the chat or, oops, you weren't supposed to see any of this. Pop them in the chat or raise your hand up and unmute and feel free to share them that way. And after questions, we do have an activity. So if there aren't any questions, I'm hoping there's at least one. Okay, thank you, Becky. What do you find has been the hardest constraint for nature-based solutions work you are doing? Ooh, good question. I mean, right now, definitely. I think it's a conversation for a lot of people in restoration. It is securing core funding. So funding that you can rely on for multiple years. Because these projects, a lot of times, they don't take one growing season to establish. They're years of conversation, their years of planning, and even establishing. I'm not sure if you caught that in the video, but The tall prairie grass, he had talked about how it took years to even establish. So sometimes it requires multiple years of attention, and that means you need funding to support the people doing that, of course, and even to pay for the material to put into the ground. So that's the main constraint I think on the top of my mind because I wouldn't even say it's community perception or perspectives on nature-based solutions because everybody is so happy and willing to have conversations. I mean that I've come across to implement these types of projects, even if it means taking away some land from what they would have made money from, or at least more money from. So it's people are valuing these spaces. They understand the roles that they play, but um, finding the funding, especially from our governments, I'll give a shout out to our government one more time, but I mean, it's been a challenge to find core funding for sure. Mhm. Okay, if there aren't any more questions, we have an activity and pretend you didn't see any of the slides that I accidentally rushed through. So I have this plot of land here, okay? This area was historically a forested habitat with some swamps and now is farmed. The landowner has, let's say, reached out to you and shared that they can no longer work this land. It's this area. Can you see my cursor on the bottom screen here? This sort of grassy looking patch is experiencing a lot of seasonal flooding. More than half of the property is heavy clay. Um, and the landowner is looking to address these water concerns, these flooding concerns on this land to take it out of production and provide habitat for wildlife here. So they want something beautiful, they want something they can retreat to, and something that holds water and keeps it away from the rest of their property while also contributing to natural heritage. So maybe everybody put on their little nature-based solution practitioner hats, and I would ask you to maybe draw out a plan. You can take a picture of your sketches and put them in the chat, or type out your approach to maybe what you would consider, what kind of nature-based solution would you apply here? It could be one, it could be multiple. There's no really wrong answer. This is just a fun activity to see how you can apply some of your learning. Let me know if I didn't do a good, I mean, do any good explaining that, but if you have any questions, put them in the chat. I guess the only thing I'm asking for you is to contribute your ideas. What do you think would be best to redirect water and hold it so it's no longer flooding the landscape here and bring back some sort of habitat that benefits the wildlife and contributes to the natural heritage of the area, which, like I mentioned, used to be tree cover. So I'll give everybody like 10 minutes. 10 minutes, so that's enough time to think up some ideas, maybe even draw something. You can email me. My email is here. If you have a drawing that you don't want to put in the chat or you want to showcase, I can put it on the screen. So you can email me or type out your approach in the chat. And you can also take this time to ask me any questions as well. Looking at in the okay, thank you, Bernie. The pre-project photo is what we were all using as a reference. The during establishment picture kind of showcase here. Can I zoom? If I zoom up, can you see? It's zoomed up. You can see the excavator was shaping the base of the wetland to be irregular, almost to mimic a natural pond. They're not smooth at the bottom. They have, very diverse terrain, you'd say, at the bottom of the wetland in order to encourage different habitat spaces for wildlife and vegetation. So that I mean, it looks a bit smoother once it's done after this, but they grade it out, they excavate, ensuring an irregular shape and an irregular bottom to, like I said, feel more like a natural space and isn't just a hole in the ground, but something that provides diverse habitat for wildlife in particular. And then you can see after they had put in the wetland, how quickly within weeks it had started filling up because the planting started at the end of the spring. So it was right when the rainy season was about to come in, but just before it got too wet that you couldn't plant. So this whole area, you can kind of see the tracks that the planter took is where they planted the trees. And in between, they like to plant grasses as well. So a lot of times people go in after and they hand seed grasses, typically ones that die off within a year. So those are like non-native cool season. I don't need to get into the details per se right now, but it's just a way for ground cover to take, I mean, hold of the soil very quickly to make sure invasives aren't moving in, and that the tree seedlings are protected. So that is what the pre, during, and post photos look like. And this was the after a couple of years. So all of you did wonderfully. Thank you so much for participating. Um, it's been a pleasure speaking with you all. So if there aren't any other questions for me, I guess we'll just wrap up. This is all we have for the presentation today. So thank you.